Hello, AP So this video is going to be to go over the answers for the review packet for the math practice for the exam. The way this is going to work, so I have each page of the packet scanned here, and I have the problems worked out already with the answers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each page relatively quickly. But the idea here is you can obviously go back and pause it and look at my work and look at what I have written down here if you don't understand how I got the answer. Some of these are very, very short answers. Some of these are a little more complicated. So this is going to be a pretty dense video because I know that you can go back and pause and look at it later. Okay, so question one is a chi-square question. A heterozygous red-eyed female was crossed with a red-eyed male. The results are shown below. Red eyes are sex-linked, dominant to white. Determine the chi-square value round to the nearest hundredth place. Now on the diagrams or the page, the grid-ins, remember these used to be grid-in questions. They're no longer, so you don't actually have to grid in the question. I had those there in the past just to practice actually gridding in. So whenever you have a chi-square question, you have to have observed results and you have to have expected results. So they've given you the observed results and they want the expected results. Now in the question, you need to figure out that the expected results should be a 3-to-1 ratio. It kind of looks like that. It looks like, there's 200 flies total here. It looks like it's probably supposed to be 150 and 50. You can't just assume that, but that is what it's going to be. So a sex-linked problem, remember when we did those, first you need to write down what's dominant. Dominant is red, recessive is white, so big R, little r. This is a female. The question said it's a heterozygous red-eyed female, so that's the female. The male is an X with a Y, and it's a red-eyed male, so that's the dad. You do the Punnett square, you can look at this, but you get red-eyed, 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 wide-eyed. The question doesn't ask for male versus female, so there's 3 red-eyed to 1 wide-eyed. The expected ratio is 3-to-1, or 75% red, 25% female, or white. So it should be 150 to 50, okay? Now the chi-square formula, and just remember, this is on the AP exam. This is the chi-square symbol. It's the sum. You do observed minus expected squared over the expected. And you do that for each choice. Here you do it twice because there's red and there's white. So here I did the math for the wide-eyed. Here I did the math, here I did the math for the red-eyed, my bad. Here I did the math for the wide-eyed. This number reduces to 1.7, this reduces to 5.12, and overall you get 6.8. The question wants the nearest hundredth place. Oh, that's the tens place. Maybe it didn't scan. Yeah, it should be 6.82. Glad I had the answers in front of me. 6.82 is the answer. Now, this question doesn't ask this, but how many degrees of freedom are there? So there's 2 choices. So there's 1 degree of freedom. I'm going to super quick pull up the formula sheet. If the question wanted to know if you reject or fail to reject, so the null hypothesis would be that that the expected versus the observed, the difference is not statistically significant. So obviously, going back, I should have gotten 150 and 50. I actually got 134 and 66. So the null would say that the difference there's a difference there. That the difference is not significant statistically. That's the null. So do I accept? Listen to me, I said accept. Do you reject or do you fail to reject? So look at the chi-square table. So there's 1 degree of freedom, right? That's this column right here. You always look at 0.05. So 3.84, that's called the critical value. So your critical value is 3.84. Your chi-square value was 6.82. So if your chi-square value is more than the critical value, which it is, then you reject the null. All right. So there's something else going on here that we are not addressing because these results are too far off from what's expected. So in this case, you reject the null because your chi-square value was higher than the critical value. Okay, there'll be other chi-square questions on this packet, so we'll practice these some more. Okay, next question, or next page rather. This is a surface area to volume question. So this is a sphere. What's the surface area to volume ratio for this cell? So surface area for a sphere is this equation. Plug in the math, I get 3.14. Volume is this equation. Plug in the math, I get 523.3. Get the ratio, I get 0.6. That's the answer. It says hundredths place, so I guess maybe it's 0.60. I don't know. On your AP exam, it won't matter because there are no grid ends, so you're not going to round a question incorrectly if there's no grid ends. Quick review: do you want this number big or do you want it small? So you want lots of surface area to diffuse things in, so you want the number big, right? As cells get bigger, this number gets smaller because remember, surface area increases by a square, volume increases by a cube. So you want the number to be big to be able to have the rate of diffusion good enough to get things to the center of the cell or throughout the entire cell, really. So the bigger the ratio, the more efficient the cell is. This is a water potential question. It just wants to know the solute potential, negative I CRT. Plug in the numbers, you get negative 7.5. All right, cool. Next page. Hardy-Weinberg. This question is giving you some strategies. 24 of the birds are recessive. The other 63, the big mistake is kids will think there's 63 birds total. There's 87 birds total. So 24 over 87 is the frequency that are recessive. That's Q squared. So 0.276, root that. So Q is 0.53. So P is 0.47. The question wants to know the frequency of the dominant allele. So that's P. So the frequency of the dominant allele is P. The frequency of the recessive allele is Q. This information, the 0.276, is the frequency of recessive individuals, which is not P or Q. That's Q squared. Okay. This question is just a rate question, and this is super to review because this is simple, but it's the kind of thing we kind of assume you can just do. We don't really do a lot of this actually in class. So it wants to know the rate of the enzymatic reaction from 2 to 4 minutes. So in this table, this is the X, this is the Y. And a rate is just rise over run. So it's change in Y over change in X. The change in Y, you went from 3.6 to 5.5. So Y went up 1.9. The change in X from 2 to 4 minutes is 2 minutes. 1.9 over 2 is 0.95. You need to have a unit. The unit would just be milliliters of O2 per minute. Honestly, if you just said milliliters per minute, that would be okay. You had to have a unit though. Okay, good. All right, next question. What page are we on? Is this question 6? It is. Laws of probability. So this is simple. The frequency of tossing 3 coins simultaneously and getting heads 3 times. So 3 things have to happen. If they each have to happen, that's a law of multiplication. Getting a heads the first time, or the first coin is a half and a half and a half. So the answer is an 8. If the question said, I did all that, what are the chances I toss a 4th coin? The 4th coin is also a heads. That's only a half. Each individual event is a half. All right, for all 3 to be heads, that's a half times a half times a half, which is an 8. Okay, cool. Next question. So I didn't assign question 7. This was ecology. This isn't on this year's AP exam, so we're not going to worry about that. So I need to go question 8. Both of these 8 and 9 are things that aren't on the AP exam this year, so we can just skip them. Question 10, standard deviation. So This is one, there's a formula on the formula sheet, but you have a graphing calculator. It's 0.19. Make sure you know how to plug in numbers to get the standard deviation. This isn't population, this is a sample deviation. The symbol is lowercase s. Just make sure you can plug those numbers in and get 0.19. Dilutions aren't on this year's AP exam, so don't worry about it. A pH question, so this is definitely relevant. So the answer is 1 times 10 to the negative 8th. This question you can grid in, which isn't an issue for you guys anyway, but the nearest whole number is 0, I guess. A pH of 8 means the H plus concentration, not the OH, right? The H plus concentration, the hydrogen ion concentration. 8 means it's 10 to the negative 8, okay? If they had asked for, so this is the answer. Here I put FYI, if they had asked for the hydroxide ion concentration, the OH minus concentration, that'd be 10 to the minus 6, because these two numbers, negative 8 and negative 6, had to add up to negative 14. The pH scale goes to 14. So if it's neutral, then both of these is negative 7. The pH is 7, and it's not acidic or basic. We use the H plus ion concentration, the hydronium ion concentration, to determine the pH. So if this number is 10 to the negative 8, the pH is 8. If this number was 10 to the minus 2, the pH would be 2. Now, one more. Let's say they gave you the OH minus concentration. The hydroxide ion concentration was 10 to the minus, I don't know, 4. If this was 10 to the minus 4, the pH would be 10. All right. If this is 10 to the minus 4, then this is 10 to the minus 10, and we use the H plus to get the pH. Okay. So these questions, as long as you can add and subtract up to 14, and you can handle negative numbers decently well, these questions are easy. Just make sure you know which, if you're looking at H plus or OH minus. Okay, cool. So now I need question 13. Question 13 is, this is just looking for an average. So, this year on the AP exam, there's only 2 essays, so this probably isn't going to happen this year. But there have been exams where they're multiple choice, where they ask you to average numbers. Like, I'm not making this up. That's happened before on old-timey grid-ins. The average of these numbers is 30.26. I mean, you wouldn't want to be the kid that misses that, right? Okay, so here's another chi-square question. So we're going to go through this quickly because we already did one of these. So if you do a chi-square, you need expected and observed. They're giving you 4 sets of data. They're giving you, here I wrote O, these are the observed numbers. Now, the expected, I don't have to do a Punnett square because it tells me there should be a 9:3:1 ratio of results. So the biggest one should be 9/16. This should be 3/16. That should be 3/16. That should be 1/16. And here I just did the math. There's 429 P's total. So 9/16, just get that as a decimal, times 429 is 241. I did the math for you. These are the expected results. These numbers add up to 428, not 429, because I rounded to the nearest whole number because we're talking about flowers. If you went to 1 decimal, you'd get the same answer, more or less. So chi-square, so you know the deal. There's 4 different possible outcomes. For each one, I do the observed minus the expected, square it over the expected. So here's the math for smooth and purple. Here's the math for smooth and white. Here's the math for wrinkled and purple. Here's the math for wrinkled and white. Add them up, you get 3.8. Now, reject, failed to reject. So let's see. So there's 4 choices. That's 3 degrees of freedom. 3 degrees of freedom right here is this column. Always use 0.05. So the critical value is 7.81. All right. My chi-square value, oh gosh, I've lost where I was. My chi-square value is 3.8. So my chi-square value is less than the critical value. So I failed to reject. So these numbers are close enough to where the difference between like 223 and 241, that difference is not statistically significant, okay? Because my chi-square value is less than my critical value. All right, fantastic. Now I need question 15. Question 15, let's zoom in, is another chi-square value. Seriously, so many chi-square questions. A student proposes that the parent plant's genotypes must have been that, and the dwarf, what is that? So anyway, do the Punnett square. You can believe me. It should be a 1-to-1-to-1-to-1 ratio. Look at the numbers. They look like it's probably 1-to-1-to-1-to-1. There should be 93 plants total. You know, get the total number of plants divided by 4. So here I just did the math for each one. Notice for the second one, there's no difference between observed and expected. So that chi-square values, or that part of the question is 0. Add all these up, you get 0.28. That's going to be less than the critical value. We just did it. It was 7 point whatever. So here you would fail to reject. Kids hate chi-square questions, but if you just set it up, observed, expected, there's 4 choices, set up the math 4 times, add it up. These really aren't that hard. Okay, that was question 15. Question 16 is a Hardy-Weinberg question. 250 on a population of 1,000 are born with sickle cell anemia. How many people in the population will be resistant to malaria because they're heterozygous? So the 250 over 1,000, the 0.25 is q squared. Square root that, 0.5, p is 0.5. Heterozygous would be 2pq. So 2 times 0.5 times 0.5. The frequency is 0.5. It asks for not a frequency, it asks for how many people. There's 1,000 people. So 0.5 times 1,000 is 500. So 500 people are heterozygous. This question honestly can kind of do it in your head. If 250 people have the recessive, out of 1,000, that's a quarter. It's 250, you're likely going to have sickle cell or have the dominant trait, and then 500 would be heterozygous. Okay, cool. Question 17 is another Hardy-Weinberg question. 16% of the P's are homozygous recessive, so Q squared is 0.16, so Q is 0.4, so P is 0.6. Frequency of the dominant allele, that's P, that's the answer. Piece of cake. Question 18 asked me a bunch of stuff. The frequency of the homozygous recessive genotype is 0.09, so that's Q squared. 0.09 is Q squared, root that, so Q is 0.3, P is 0.7. A wants the P and Q value, we just did that. B wants the frequency of individuals that are dominant, that's P squared, which is 0.7 squared, which is 0.49 or 49%. C, the frequency of individuals that show the dominant trait, that's P squared or 2PQ. Both those show the dominant trait. So do the math, 0.7 squared plus what's 2PQ, 2 times 0.7 times 0.3, that's 0.49, that's 0.42. Add them up, 0.91 or 91%. This you should honestly do in your head because it tells you that 0.09 showed the recessive genotype. So that's 9%. So the other 91% show the dominant phenotype. Cool. So now I need question number 19. That's not 19. Where's 19? 18. This is anticlimactic. Where's question 19? Do I not have question 19 on here? Well, let's just move along then. Maybe I don't have it on here. Well, let's just move along. Question 21 is an ecology question, which we didn't do. Question 22. Determine to the nearest whole number how many times greater the hydrogen ion concentration was at King Philip Brook. So King Philip Brook was pH of 5. Robbins Pond was pH of 9. So 5 is more acidic. So you hold up a fist. So pH 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a 1 with 4 zeros. So it's 10,000. Okay. I don't have page 19. Page 19. Oh, I didn't take a picture of it. So on page 19, just listen to my words. Question 19, I didn't assign to you. Question 20, it's just a water potential question. It tells you the solute potential is negative 0.6 and the pressure potential is negative 1, so you add them together. So for question 20, the answer is negative 1.60 megapascals. Okay, I just didn't take a picture of that page. Okay, and I do believe that was a whirlwind of math. So hopefully that video was helpful. You're probably going to want to look through parts of it again to look at my work and to look at the correct answers. Good. All right, awesome. We'll see you next time.